just got done watching an incredible documentary, I Have Never Forgotten You, about Simon Wiesenthal. And he was a Holocaust survivor and devoted his life to apprehending Nazi war criminals that committed horrific atrocities against the Jews and other people. And this was such an inspirational documentary because this man endured just brutal conditions and immense suffering and was able to move beyond that and devote his life in investing in other people. He not only, I think the pursuit of the Nazi criminals was not the main catalyst which drove him. It was becoming a symbol of healing for a people that had such tragedy and brutality inflicted upon them that they were able to rally behind this man as a beacon of light. He was just part of the healing process. And the preeminent theme throughout the documentary was the selflessness of Mr. Wiesenthal. He was not in it for the ego, and it's almost like, he had dignitaries, presidents, ambassadors, politicians, lavishing praise upon him, and he said, "I'm not a hero, I'm a survivor." And his story is so, one, gut-wrenching, and two, humbling, because when I look at my own problems or dramas and the things that we normally label as suffering, and why we pursue the spiritual path and meditate or read books or go seek gurus, we must ask ourselves, what is the purpose? Why invest that kind of energy in ourselves? And it really hit me after watching this documentary, because the purpose is so we can move beyond ourselves, so we no longer have the spotlight focused upon ourselves and our own dramas, problems, stresses, struggles, tragedies, because in the grand scheme of life, it's really, really trivial, especially in the Western world, the things and problems that we endure. Now, there's immense suffering in the Western world, so I'm not negating that, but I'm saying the average, the day-to-day things that might affect us, whether it's just the day-to-day struggles and sufferings. And inner peace, the fast track to inner peace is moving beyond yourself, moving beyond your own trials and tribulations. This man who was a Holocaust survivor and had plenty of righteousness to bitch about what he endured, did not take that path. He wanted to invest his life in helping others and to not allow something like the Holocaust to happen again. And it was such a, you could read spiritual books and you can do all these things which generally tend to engage the mind or engage the me or the I as we're trying to fix ourselves. And we could say, okay, we could sludge along that path. Or we could say, hey, the best way to move beyond myself is to invest in the lives of other people that are less fortunate, or people that need a shoulder to lean on. And as we become awakened and aware, we realize, man, there is so much suffering to this day that occurs in the world. I was just reading an article about slavery, and that this time in history, there are more slaves today than there were back in the times of the 1800s when slavery was mainstream in America and in other parts of the world. In Haiti, in Dominican Republic, and all over the world, the sex slave trade, the selling people to foreigners or to other people as indentured servants, and beyond that, the wars that people have to endure, the brutality, the torturing, the suffering, the factory farming, that animals, it's just mind-boggling how much suffering goes on, and we're totally unaware. You won't read about it in the average American or Western newspaper. You won't hear about it on corporate-owned network news. So one really has to have a hunger to first awaken themselves, and then once you say, okay, you know what, that's no big deal, I realize that life is about suffering, I'm going to suffer, and just accept the lot that we've been given and say, I want to move beyond that by blessing other people's lives. And then just magically our own problems just kind of evaporate, and our awakening just blossoms, because we no longer are obsessed with self and ego and the mind and problems and all those things. So, I've seen, here's some ways that really have just transformed my worldview. Before, and especially Americans are often accused of this, of just having a very narrow view of, seeing the world through a small crystal ball called America. And I just always wanted to know what's going on. What is the truth? What is the real story behind the 15-second headlines that we see? And then so I started reading stuff on the internet, reading books, and then watching documentaries has been incredibly powerful way to learn what is going on and to no longer be ignorant. And yes, it's more burdensome. It can feel more burdensome to know the immense suffering that goes on in the world. But it's also becomes a catalyst. It becomes the fuel which ignites the fire of someone like Simon Wiesenthal, who's seen suffering firsthand. And maybe part of the problem is we, as Americans, we haven't experienced suffering, so it's hard for us to empathize or even be aware of what, the majority of people in the world, what they're enduring and what their struggles and their trials and their tribulations and just the tragedies, really, the torturing, the wars, the bloodshed that goes on in the world. And, it's like that ball that was once narrow, first it starts with us, okay, I move beyond myself, and now I can see, okay, I can see a bigger picture. Traveling has been a great avenue or vehicle to expand one's awareness. And then in our own little ways, we can make the difference. And going back, for those of you that did not see my other video about the starfish story, there's a starfish lined up along the beach, along the sand, as far as the eye can see, and they're all drying out. And I can see like an elderly Mr. Wiesenthal character, bending down. And this, many people would detour him and say, let the war go, stop, finding Nazis and bringing them to justice, and what's the point of all this? And this man on the beach was picking up these starfish and taking them and putting them back in the ocean, picking them up one by one and throwing them back in the ocean. And, there's thousands upon thousands of starfish along this beach, and people would gather around and say, what's the point? What are you doing? What does it matter? You're never going to save all this starfish. And he bends down, picks up a starfish, holds it in his hand, throws it in the ocean, and looks the people in the eye and says, it matters to that one.